Let's go. You in the runway pop up. You in the walk the runway since Walker. You in the runway pop up. You in the walk the runway since Walker. You in the walk the runway. You in the walk the runway. You in the walk the runway.
If someone's fabulous, then you are a bad bitch. Period. Like, you just know who you are. You wear who you are on your front page. Like, everybody knows your status. Like, fabulousness is like being everything.
Fabulousness. Let's talk about it. When thinking of the words fabulousness or fabulous, one might think of something, not someone, like feathers or glitter, something dazzling or visually attractive. Yet these words are much more meaningful in the queer community. Within Fabulous, The Rise of the Beautiful Eccentric by Madison Moore, the author defines this word as fabulousness is dangerous, political, confrontational, risky, and largely, but certainly not only, practiced by queer, trans, and trans feminine people of color and other marginalized groups. It's about making a spectacle of yourself, not merely to be seen, but because your body is constantly suppressed and undervalued. This definition of fabulous and fabulousness showcases the social impact fashion has in the queer community. It is a form of bucking the hegemonic ideologies utilized to push queer bodies into marginal spaces.
I think a lot of queer presentation of clothing can be quite political.
New York City is one of the birthplaces of drag culture and arguably the epicenter of fabulousness as a form of social crusade against hegemony. The underground drag scene dates back to the 1920s in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance. I visited the Hamilton Lodge, a historical site for the ball scene in Harlem. I'm at the crossroads of Frederick Douglass and West 155th Street, where the Hamilton Lodge once stood. The Hamilton Lodge was a place of refuge where queer bodies could comfortably lose themselves through self-expression.
Open to all runway.
The Hamilton Lodge, that used to host annual balls, was the queerest place to be at the time. It has since been demolished to make way for a storage facility. This legendary locale, which was once the heart of the queer community, is gone without recognition or acknowledgement. To better understand the power of fashion and expression within the queer community, I sat down with Linda Simpson, a famous drag queen and comedian, who started her journey during the drag boom in the late 80s and early 90s.
I think the queer community has a tendency to do that, to play with traditional, traditional clothing, for lack of a better word, and, put a twist on it. Just like, real sissy guys will often kind of be dandies, and real butch women will, be tough lumberjacks, stuff that's kind of not expected when you're sort of like, just living the heterosexual mainstream experience.
Miss Simpson took photos throughout her early career and has become an accidental archivalist. Her photography ended up capturing intimate moments within the 80s drag world that would have been otherwise lost. I asked Simpson to explain how drag fits into this definition of fabulousness as defined by Madison Moore.
Well, it can be a very radical act to dress in drag, depending on where you are, even in New York sometimes, and, present yourself in public. I think even if the intent isn't to be, political or radical, maybe it is, just because of the norms of our society, and it's someone going against the grain.
As drag has become more of a daylight thing, accepted by the mainstream, has this process watered down how fabulousness and overall queer fashion was once a vehicle for social protest? Or is this acceptance a positive thing because now these aesthetics can be normalized? Miss Simpson shed light on this in our interview.
Once something becomes a little more accepted or globbed on by the mainstream, it's not going to be quite as shocking or underground or as effective in some ways. But I also think that it's good that, I think the point was, just for like gay rights, for drag queens to be accepted. So, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You lose some of the cutting edge antics that were going on that only like a small insider crowd was aware of. But at the same time, being accepted by the mainstream comes with many rewards.
There is no question that queer aesthetics have influenced mainstream fashion. As Linda pointed out, this acceptance comes with favorable and unfavorable consequences. Although making a space for queer expression in the norm is important, we must acknowledge where this influence originates. Since the Hamilton Lodge has not been recognized as a historical site in Harlem today, I wanted to see if the term fabulousness holds any weight as a tool for queer expression as it once did. I conducted man-on-the-street interviews in New York to get a better perspective of how young people define fabulousness today.
Fabulousness means to me is to just rock who you are as a person, be yourself, and not take into account other people's opinions of yourself.
Just expressing the deepest, most hidden away parts of yourself.
Figuring out what makes you feel beautiful, I think, makes you fabulous. It's like the confidence, what makes you fabulous.
Fabulousness is like cunt, stunning, just like in the moment, standing out, like just overall fierce.
I would say that fabulousness just means being comfortable in your own skin and owning it 100%.
As Madison Moore states, great style is never simply style for style's sake. It isn't about looking good and feeling confident. It's also a form of protest. It revolts against the norms and systems that oppress and torture us all every day. Hopefully, educating people on the origin of this term within queer history will bring the necessary recognition to venues such as the Hamilton Lodge, and help young people realize fashion can also be a tool of protest. Manhattan, New York, Isabel Mashmit, NYU Journalism.